You asked me to be a witness in the trial. I owed you my life, and so I said yes. What does one wear to a rape testimony? Your lawyer and I debated this endlessly. Nothing too tight, nothing too baggy, nothing too ratty, nothing too expensive, something sexless yet attractive. A suit jacket, perhaps, but nothing flashy. A light navy was best, black was too morbid, too dark. I wanted to seem serious but not angry, definitely not vengeful. Maybe glasses were a good idea, but the frames had to be simple, nothing flamboyant, nothing too gay, nothing that might trigger juror prejudice. Something to wear while the world decided if I had been raped. Something that said, believe me. That was the opening to the book Yes, Daddy by Jonathan Parks-Ramage. And this is my first official standalone book review, so I figured since I just finished reading this and I had a lot of stuff to say about it, I would talk about it. So as you can tell from that opening, this novel is probably not for the faint of heart. It focuses on Jonah, who is a struggling playwright in New York City. He works a dead-end job as a waiter with a boss that doesn't respect him, can barely afford to pay rent, and in fact is about to become homeless. But he's an aspiring playwright, and he hears about another much more famous and successful playwright named Richard Shriver, who's this older, attractive man, and he thinks, well, if I can get in a relationship with him, then I can have a mentor to help me with my writing, and I can not worry about these debts anymore. And he does. He ingratiates himself into Richard's company, and they begin a whirlwind relationship. But of course, as you can tell from that prologue, it doesn't go well. So this book was really interesting. First of all, the thing that was interested me about it was the fact that, as you can tell from kind of the cover and sort of the lurid writing style, it's kind of going for this sort of a neo-Gothic melodrama, sort of modern-day Rebecca kind of vibe. In fact, actually, there's several references in this book to Rebecca, where Jonah is this younger man who's a kept boy to this older man, and he's sort of always being compared to the previous boyfriends and things like that. So it's very, very similar to Rebecca, and I believe someone at some point even refers to Rebecca by name. So that was interesting, sort of a gay neo-Gothic sort of thriller type of thing. And on that count, as sort of a neo-Gothic thing, it's written pretty well. It feels very believable in that sense. But then sort of another sort of deeper layer to the novel is Jonah reflecting on a testimony that he gave at someone else's rape trial, because, of course, this man was abusing multiple people. And the thing that hooked me in the beginning of the book was that prologue that you read, and this isn't a spoiler because this is the first 6 pages, he lies and says that everything was made up and nobody was raped and everything is fine. So, and then the novel goes back in time to explore the beginning of his relationship with this older abuser and its effect on him. So that was one thing that I thought was really, really interesting about the novel, and that sort of and that sort of made it rise above sort of just being like a sort of a gay pot boiler, in that you already know that this character has done something reprehensible. It's this horrible, horrible thing for him to do, but then we stay with him throughout the book and we follow him. And to be honest, like he's not a great guy. He's manipulative. He's petty. He's prone to moments of anger. He's very, very flawed. But as you spend more time with him, you start to understand why he is the way he is. And while you don't, the book doesn't ask you to forgive him. In fact, a big theme in this book is forgiveness. It doesn't ever ask you to forgive him. You just follow him along on his journey. So there was a lot to like about this book. It had a lot of interesting things to say about power dynamics, sort of about sort of a reflection on the Me Too era, with people who are powerless being abused by powerful men. There's a lot of stuff about just the entertainment industry in general. But there were a few things that kept it from really working for me. The main thing is that this book is it's a roller coaster of emotions. I mean, there's all this stuff going on with Jonah and Richard, and then there's present plot lines of Jonah reflecting on the fallout from everything, from the present. There's a lot going on in this book, but the book's only 279 pages. So we spend around the first third of the book establishing this relationship, and then in the rest of that, there's all this other stuff of him escaping the compound, of the lead up to the trial, of the fallout from the trial, of the emotional turmoil that he goes through, in his quest to sort of like find forgiveness for his role in acquitting Richard. Jonah goes through a lot of different guises. He gets into drugs. He becomes an alcoholic. At one point, he becomes a born-again Christian, and then that only lasts for like 2 chapters. It's too fast-paced. In something like, I haven't read Rebecca, but I know enough about it to sort of infer that part of the appeal of Rebecca, and of a lot of sort of Gothic-type books, is that a big part of it is the deliberate pace of the story, giving the characters and the locales and the emotional points sort of time to breathe. And there wasn't really a lot of that in this book. We're moving on from one thing to another thing to another thing. Jonathan Parks-Ramage keeps throwing tons of ideas and plot points and sort of character arcs and things at the wall to see what sticks. And on paper, I think a lot of it was really interesting. There were a lot of individual scenes that were written really well. There were a lot of very powerful moments. But it all like goes by so quickly that there's really no chance to kind of like absorb any of it or savor any of it. And I thought also, as a result of that sort of very compact pacing, a lot of the characters suffered as a result. I thought Jonah, of course, was the most developed because he's the narrator, but you would think, Richard Shriver or some of the victims that he meets would be a little bit more developed, but they're really not, especially Richard Shriver. I found that the book sort of couldn't really find an easy balance between the sort of lurid neo-Gothic melodrama of the book and then sort of the more sober, realistic kind of motivation, observations on power dynamics and rape and stuff like that. It didn't really go together. And as a character, like, Richard is kind of just every gaslighting stereotype you could ever think of, which is fine. And I understand that, like, sometimes bad guys are bad. Not everyone's a fully developed three-dimensional person. Sometimes a person is an asshole just because they're an asshole. But this just felt very, very hackneyed to me. Like, for example, there's a whole thing about Richard having mommy issues, and, like, a big part of his whole sort of thing is, like, his hang-ups with his mom, and the way that it's executed in the book, just it feels like something out of like Mommy Dearest. It's like so ridiculous and over the top, but at the same time so like stereotypical. Like, you've seen that kind of stuff in like countless movies and thrillers and that kind of thing. The powerful man with mommy issues. You know what I mean? Like, it just felt so. It just didn't work for me. I also felt that while Jonah was an interesting character and I felt that he was well developed, there was another interesting sort of subplot going on that I kind of wish the book focused on more, where the person whose trial that he's testifying at is this young actor named Mace, who is this child star who was one of the people who was groomed and abused by Richard. And they sort of a big part of the book is about the guilt that Jonah feels for his part in sort of Mace's downfall. We learn a lot about Mace through letters and through Jonah's recollection and stuff. And to be honest, he sounds like a lot more interesting of a character because he was abused when. He was abused when he was young. He was about 16, and so there wasn't nearly as much of a sense of independence as there would be from somebody like Jonah. I mean, obviously Jonah was struggling, but he was still an adult. You know what I mean? Whereas like Mace not only was abused when he was young and didn't really have the ability to fully process what he was doing, what he was subjecting himself to. But also there's a whole big thing in the book about the sort of smear campaign from Mace, how he's seen as just like this, washed-up actor trying to get court controversy to get back in the limelight. And then we never really, like, learn a lot, we never really feel what that's like, to be... to to be a victim and then to be a total pariah, especially from such a vulnerable position as being a child star who's like struggling with drug addiction and things. I don't know. I just felt like their relationship is actually kind of the real heart of the novel, as opposed to Jonah and Richard. So I don't know. I feel like we could have used more on him. I feel like he was a lot more interesting, and I don't want to spoil anything, but like the way his sort of storyline resolves in the book, I thought was really unsatisfying. I'm not opposed with how it resolved, but the journey to getting there. This book really, it wasn't perfect, but I do think that the writing was very sharp. I thought Jonathan Parks-Ramage was very good at kind of dipping into that like catty, gay sort of dialogue, and mixing that with kind of the neo-Gothic melodrama and stuff. And there was a lot of moving passages in the more sort of realistic, straightforward, serious moments too. So there were a lot of good elements to this book. I just don't think they all cohered. But I do think this was his debut novel. This just came out this year. This was his debut novel. So I do think that there is potential there, and I would really like to see what Jonathan Parks-Ramage comes up with next, because while I thought this book was flawed in a lot of ways, it was interesting. I enjoyed my time reading it. And if that seems like something you'd be interested in, I would check it out. I'd give it about 3 stars. So yeah, I liked it, but I didn't love it. But I would like to see what he has in store for the future. So that was Yes, Daddy by Jonathan Parks-Ramage, and this is Bartell's Bookshelf signing off. Bye.